Welcome to our channel, where everyday moments hide deeper mysteries, where ordinary people face extraordinary choices, and where you help decide what happens next. In every episode, you will hear a story inspired by real life, situations we might all experience, conversations we could all have, and decisions that could change everything. Listen carefully. Pay attention to the clues. And when the moment comes, you will choose what the main character should do. Type your choice in the comments.
Silverwood Manor stood like an ancient sentinel at the edge of the old Hartwell estate, its long white facade gleaming beneath the pale morning sun. The mansion was nearly a century old, wrapped with ivy and crowned by tall windows that reflected the surrounding gardens. Every visitor who stepped onto its marble steps immediately understood that it was not merely a house, it was a legacy. And at the center of that legacy was Eleanor Hartwell, the formidable woman who ruled it with a gentle but unmistakably iron presence. Eleanor was 74 years old, though people often forgot it. She carried herself with a kind of ageless elegance, her gray hair always collected in a smooth twist, her posture straight, her eyes sharp with intelligence. She wore pearls every day not because of vanity, but because they had belonged to her mother. Her mother's mother had worn them too. Everything Eleanor owned held a story, and everything she kept had a reason. She was widowed but not lonely. Eleanor Hartwell did not need crowds or parties. She needed her home, her books, her rose garden, and above all her daughter Clara. Clara was 28, soft-hearted and brilliant, with a fierce loyalty to her mother. She had grown up wandering the corridors of Silverwood Manor, playing in its grand halls, hiding behind velvet curtains, listening to the old clock ticking in the library. Eleanor had raised her almost entirely alone after her husband died, and there was a closeness between them that neither distance nor time had ever managed to weaken. Yet recently something had changed. Something subtle, like a draft you only notice when a door has been left slightly ajar. Eleanor felt it first in Clara's hurried smiles, in the way she seemed distracted, often on her phone, in the way she mentioned a friend, with an excitement that didn't quite fit the vague details she gave. But that concern rested at the edge of Eleanor's mind. Today she focused instead on her morning routine. The mansion was silent except for the soft hum of the staff beginning their duties in the distant corridors. Eleanor moved through her private parlor with the ease of someone who had spent a lifetime within these walls. She opened the tall windows, letting in a cool breeze that carried the scent of dew and roses. The garden outside, her pride and joy, had been part of the estate since before her grandparents were born. Tall hedges carefully trimmed, rose bushes in every shade of red and pink, a fountain at the center shaped like an angel pouring water from a broken urn. Eleanor stepped outside for her walk, her cane tapping lightly on the stone path. Though she didn't need the cane very much, she used it out of habit. It had belonged to her late husband, Richard. And today she felt nostalgic. As she walked, she thought of him. Richard had been the love of her youth and the anchor of her adulthood. A kind man with gentle eyes, always ready with laughter. They had built their lives together, and though his absence still ached like a bruise that never fully healed, Eleanor kept him close, in memories, in the objects he once loved, in the traditions they built. She paused at the fountain, touching the cool stone of the angel's wings. "You'd know what to do," she whispered. "You always did." She rarely spoke aloud to him, but mornings in the garden made her sentimental. "Mom." Eleanor turned at the voice. Clara was rushing down the steps of the manor, her light brown hair bouncing behind her, her blue dress fluttering in the wind. She carried a cup of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. "You're up early today," Eleanor said. Clara grinned. "I couldn't sleep and I wasn't going to lie in bed when you're out here enjoying the morning." Eleanor smiled warmly. Clara's presence always softened her expression. But today something was different. Something in Clara's eyes, a kind of excitement mixed with nervousness, like someone struggling to keep a secret. Clara stood beside her mother, taking a sip of her coffee, looking a little too distracted by whatever flickered across her phone screen. "Everything all right?" Eleanor asked. "Yes. Everything's great," Clara said too quickly. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Clara laughed, brushing a hand through her hair. "Mom, please don't give me that look." "What look?" "The one that says, 'I know something is going on, young lady, and I won't rest until I figure it out.' That look." Eleanor chuckled. I don't have a look like that. You absolutely do. Oh, I definitely do, Eleanor admitted, and Clara laughed again. They walked together through the garden in comfortable silence as they often did. But Eleanor couldn't ignore the unspoken tension. Something Clara wasn't ready to share, or perhaps was afraid to. Mom, Clara said finally, stopping beside the rose bushes. Can I tell you something? Eleanor's heart gave a small, hopeful leap. Of course. Clara hesitated, biting her lip. But before she could speak, her phone buzzed. She checked the screen and her face lit up with a smile. It's him, Clara murmured. Him. Oh. Clara stepped back, flustered. No, not like that. Just a friend. A friend. Eleanor didn't believe that for a second. Clara's entire expression transformed. She glowed. Invite him for dinner, Eleanor said softly. Clara's eyes widened. What? Well, I mean, not yet. It's too soon. Too soon? For friendship? Eleanor knew better than to press. If Clara wasn't ready to talk about him, pushing wouldn't help. But she also knew her daughter. When Clara hid something, it wasn't out of deceit. It was fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of disappointing her mother. Fear of repeating her father's loss, perhaps. They continued walking and Eleanor touched Clara's arm gently. Whoever he is, she said, he must be someone special if he puts that smile on your face. Clara blushed. Maybe. Eleanor's heart twinged. She wanted to trust that everything was fine. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows over the garden, an uneasy feeling spread through her chest. Something unseen. Something unspoken. Later that afternoon, Eleanor returned to the library, her sanctuary of dust and leather-bound books. She settled into the red velvet armchair beside the fireplace, sipping tea and rereading one of her favorite novels. But her concentration broke when she heard soft footsteps. Knock, knock, Clara said, slipping into the room. She sat on the arm of Eleanor's chair. I'm going out this evening. With your friend? Eleanor asked lightly. Clara nodded. What's his name? Clara shifted nervously. Adrian. Eleanor repeated the name in her mind. Sounded charming. Polished. The kind of name people like to trust. And that alone made her uneasy. Will you be home late? She asked. Not too late. Don't worry. I always worry. It's the job description. Clara smiled, kissed her mother on the forehead and rushed out. Eleanor sat still for a moment. Then she rose, walking to the window. She watched Clara leave the manor grounds, watched the gates close behind her daughter's car, and felt that unsettling draft again, the one that comes when a door is left slightly open to something dangerous. She turned away from the window, her cane tapping sharply on the floor. Adrian, she whispered to herself. A name. Nothing more. Yet already, it lingered in her thoughts like a shadow stretching across the first chapter of a story that had not yet revealed its threat. But it would. Very soon.
The evening air in the city shimmered with warm streetlights as Clara parked her car in front of the small, elegant cafe where she agreed to meet Adrian. The place wasn't fancy, nothing like the grandness of Silverwood Manor, but it had charm. Hanging vines along the windows, small round tables, and the soft sound of jazz drifting from speakers hidden somewhere inside. Clara stepped out, brushing her hair back nervously. She wasn't usually the type to get flustered by someone she liked. At least, not until Adrian. She had met him 3 months earlier at a charity art event downtown. He was standing alone near a painting of a stormy ocean, dressed in a crisp dark suit that somehow made him look both modern and timeless. He seemed out of place and yet perfectly at ease. When their eyes met, he'd smiled. An easy, warm smile that had tugged at something inside her. They talked for nearly an hour, and Clara remembered thinking he had the most gentle voice she'd ever heard. And now, after weeks of dinners, walks, and long conversations, she was falling for him faster than she'd ever fallen for anyone. Clara took a deep breath and walked inside. The cafe was quiet tonight, just a few couples, some students, and the elderly owner arranging pastries behind the counter. And then she saw him. Adrian stood from his seat the moment she entered, waving with that same calming smile. "Clara," he said warmly. "You look beautiful." She laughed softly. "Stop, you're making me blush." "Well, I mean it." Adrian was handsome in a way that seemed effortless. Dark hair, neatly styled, soft brown eyes that could shift from playful to thoughtful in an instant. His clothes were always tasteful but never showy. Everything about him felt controlled, measured, smooth. But Clara liked that. She liked that he made her feel safe. They sat together, and immediately the conversation flowed as naturally as it always did. "So," Adrian said, leaning forward, "how was your day at the manor?"
Clara smiled. "Busy. And Mom knows something's up." Adrian's eyes sparkled. "Does she? Should I be worried?" "Well," Clara teased, "she has very good intuition. And she wants to meet you." Adrian froze for just a fraction of a second. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Clara caught it. Then he laughed lightly. "Already? I must have made quite the impression if she's asking for me." "She didn't ask," Clara corrected. "I told her about you." "Oh," he said softly. "I see." Clara reached for his hand. "I know it's soon, but I want you to meet her. You're important to me." Adrian squeezed her hand gently, and though he smiled, something flickered in his eyes. Something calculating. Something hidden. "Of course," he said. "I would love to meet her." But the warmth in his voice was a little too smooth. A little too perfect. Later that night, after dinner and dessert and long, sweet conversation, Clara returned home. The manor was quiet when she entered, the hall lights dimmed, her mother no doubt already in her room reading. Clara walked softly through the foyer, humming to herself. She didn't notice the figure standing in the shadows of the staircase. Eleanor had been waiting. "Good evening," Eleanor said calmly, stepping forward. Clara startled. "Mom, you scared me." "I apologize." Eleanor's expression was measured. Neither angry nor overly curious, just sharply attentive. "You're home later than usual." Clara rolled her eyes in amusement. "Mom, it's only 10. I wasn't out clubbing. I had dinner." "With Adrian," Eleanor said. Clara froze. "How did you know?" "You said his name before leaving," Eleanor replied, moving toward her daughter slowly. "And you were smiling at your phone all afternoon. It wasn't difficult to guess." Clara sighed, setting her purse down. "Mom, please. Don't scrutinize him before you even meet him." "I'm not scrutinizing," Eleanor said gently. "I'm simply aware." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Would you like to meet him?" Clara asked. Eleanor smiled. "Very much." The next morning, Silverwood Manor hummed with quiet preparation. Eleanor insisted that only the small dining room be set for lunch. Something intimate, not overwhelming. Fresh flowers were placed on the table, a soft classical record played, and sunlight streamed through tall windows. Eleanor dressed with more care than usual, not to impress but to observe. First impressions were everything, and she wanted to quietly absorb every detail of the man who had captured her daughter's heart. By noon, Clara stood by the window, anxiously smoothing her dress. "He'll be here soon," she said. Eleanor touched her daughter's arm. "You're glowing." Clara smiled shyly. I really like him." Eleanor's heart tightened. Claire was not someone who fell easily. Whoever Adrian was, he had already become important. Eleanor silently prayed she wouldn't have to shatter that. A knock echoed through the hall. "That's him," Clara whispered. Eleanor watched her daughter rush to the door, watched her pull it open, watched the man on the other side step inside. He was exactly as Clara described. Young, handsome, polite. His suit was expertly tailored but understated. His shoes polished, his hair well kept. His posture straight, respectful. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, extending his hand with that perfect smile. "It's an honor to finally meet you." His tone was warm. Too warm. Like a salesman trained to charm. Eleanor shook his hand. "Welcome to Silverwood Manor." His grip was firm. His eyes were sharp. And Eleanor felt the smallest, coldest prickle run down her spine. Sequel. Lunch began pleasantly enough. Clara and Adrian talked about books, traveling, art. Adrian asked polite questions, made thoughtful comments. He complimented the manor without being excessive. But Eleanor saw things Clara did not. She saw how Adrian's eyes scanned the room, lingering on valuable paintings, antique vases, the old grandfather clock. She saw the way he subtly checked the locks on the French doors. She saw how he asked about Clara's childhood, about family assets disguised as harmless questions, about the estate's history. He was charming, undeniably so. But Eleanor had lived long enough to know that charm was not the same as goodness. "So," Eleanor said calmly during dessert, "tell me about your family, Adrian." Adrian's smile faltered for half a second. "Nothing much to tell," he said. "My parents passed away. I grew up mostly on my own." "Where?" Eleanor asked softly. He hesitated again, one breath too long. "Up north," he said. "A small town." Eleanor noticed Clara looking anxiously between them. Adrian caught the tension quickly and replaced his hesitation with a smooth, easy laugh. "I don't like talking about myself too much," he said. "Old habits." But Eleanor knew better. She saw behind the smile. She saw the wall he'd built. And she saw the shadows behind his eyes, shadows she recognized. She had encountered such men before. Men who lied smoothly. Men who wanted something. Men who built trust carefully, deliberately. When lunch ended, Adrian thanked Eleanor graciously and left with Clara for a walk in the garden. Only when the door closed did Eleanor let her polite mask fade. "Adrian," she whispered, the name heavy with suspicion. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. And Eleanor knew with the absolute certainty that comes only from instinct sharpened by experience. This charming stranger had not just entered their lives. He had entered their lives with a purpose. A purpose she intended to uncover. The following week unfolded with the kind of deceptive calm that Eleanor Hartwell knew never to trust. Silverwood Manor glowed in early autumn sunlight, the trees turning gold at their edges, the gardens rustling with the changing season. But inside the house Eleanor felt a shift, subtle, fragile and unsettling. Clara was radiant these days, moving through the halls with the quiet joy of someone newly in love. She often hummed softly to herself, smiled at her phone, and drifted in and out of the manor with a dreamy expression that made her look younger, almost like the girl she'd been years ago. And Eleanor wanted so dearly to be happy for her. But every time her thoughts wandered back to Adrian, she felt that cold prick of unease along the back of her neck, the same sensation she experienced when she sensed a storm long before clouds gathered. Adrian had eaten lunch with them twice now, and each time he left her with more questions than answers. Shaky. On Thursday morning, Eleanor went down to the kitchen earlier than usual. The staff bustled quietly, polishing silver, preparing breakfast, arranging baskets of warm pastries. As Eleanor poured herself a cup of tea, her longtime housekeeper Margaret approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Hartwell," Margaret said in a low voice, "may I speak with you privately?" Eleanor arched an eyebrow, intrigued. "Of course." They stepped into the adjoining pantry, a small, quiet space scented with herbs and spice jars. Margaret twisted her hands nervously, an unusual gesture for a woman normally unshakable. "It's about the man Miss Clara has been seeing," Margaret said. Eleanor felt her pulse quicken. "Go on." Margaret hesitated. "Yesterday he arrived to pick her up. I greeted him at the door. He was polite, but something felt off." Eleanor leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "Well," Margaret lowered her voice even more. "After Miss Clara went upstairs to get her bag, I noticed him looking around. Not casually, no. He examined the entryway mirror, the locks, the hall closet. Even stepped back to look up at the security camera." Adrian had done these things with such practiced subtlety that only someone as keen as Margaret would have noticed. "Did he say anything?" Eleanor asked. Margaret nodded reluctantly. "He asked me how many people live in the manor. How many staff members work weekdays versus weekends. Whether we have security at night." Eleanor didn't breathe for a moment. "And what did you say?" she asked. "Nothing specific. I pretended not to understand the question and changed the subject. But Mrs. Hartwell..." Margaret met her eyes, voice trembling. There was something in his eyes. Something calculating. Eleanor closed her hand around her teacup, steady but tense. "You did the right thing," Eleanor said quietly. "And you must not mention this to Clara." "Not yet." Margaret nodded, visibly relieved to have shared the burden. When Eleanor returned upstairs, she walked with slow, measured steps. She'd trusted her intuition before. It had saved her from business missteps and false friends. But now her intuition wasn't just whispering, it was warning her with urgency. Later that day, Clara found her mother in the sunroom trimming roses. The sunlight streamed through the glass walls, warming the tiled floor and filling the room with a soft glow. Clara entered barefoot, her phone in hand. "Mom," she said gently, "you've been quiet all morning." Eleanor snipped a rose stem. "Have I?" Clara sat on the cushioned bench. "Yes. And when you're quiet, you're thinking." "Well," Eleanor replied, "one hopes those two things occur at the same time." Clara laughed and rolled her eyes. "Mom." Eleanor set down her shears. "How well do you know Adrian?" Clara's smile softened into something uncertain. "Well enough." "Well enough for what?" Clara hesitated. "Well enough to trust him." "Trust must be earned," Eleanor said. "Even by people we like." Clara frowned. "Mom, you're doing that thing again." "Which thing?" "The cautious thing. The suspicious thing. You don't have to protect me from everything." Eleanor looked at her daughter with a tenderness Clara didn't see. "Yes," Eleanor said quietly, "I do." Clara sighed, shifting uncomfortably. "Adrian is a good man. You just haven't gotten to know him yet." Eleanor watched her closely. "Has he ever asked you about the estate?" Clara blinked in surprise. "What? Oh. Why would he?" "He asked Margaret," Eleanor said softly. Clara froze. "What?" "He asked her how many people live here. How many work here. If we have nighttime security." Clara shook her head quickly. "There must have been a misunderstanding." "It was not a misunderstanding." Clara's voice rose slightly. "Mom, please. You're reading too much into things." Eleanor's tone deepened, steady but heavy. "I know what I saw. And I know what was reported to me." Clara stood abruptly, her face clouded with frustration. "Adrian is not a thief or a criminal, Mom." Eleanor held her daughter's gaze. "I did not say he was." "You're implying it." "I'm saying," Eleanor said gently, "that we must be careful." Clara inhaled slowly, fighting tears. "I love you, Mom. But I need you to trust me too." With that, Clara turned and walked out of the room, leaving Eleanor surrounded by roses suddenly stripped of their sweetness. That afternoon, Eleanor sat in her private study, the weight of worry pressing against her chest. She needed answers, not intuition, not suspicions, but facts. And facts she knew required investigation. She opened the drawer of her mahogany desk and pulled out her old leather address book, filled with numbers of friends, lawyers, contacts from her late husband's business circles. She flipped through until she found the right name, Detective Samuel Rourke, a retired investigator now working privately. Eleanor picked up the phone and dialed. He answered on the third ring. "Rourke." "Samuel," Eleanor said. "It's Eleanor Hartwell." "Eleanor. It's been ages. What can I do for you?" "I need information," she said. Discreetly. Thoroughly. Rourke chuckled. "You always did get straight to the point." "There's a man named Adrian Hale," Eleanor continued. "Early 30s. Lives in the city. I need to know everything you can find about him. Background, finances, personal history. Whatever you can uncover." Rourke went quiet for a moment. "Trouble?" he asked softly. "I hope not," Eleanor replied. "But my daughter cares for him. And I must be certain." "You'll have what I find," he promised. "Give me a few days." "Thank you, Samuel." When she hung up, Eleanor felt a small measure of calm. Answers were coming. Whatever truth Adrian carried, light or dark, would not stay hidden for long. That night, as the manor settled under dim lights and quiet rustling of the wind outside, Eleanor stood by her bedroom window, watching the garden sway beneath the moonlight. She thought of Clara. She thought of Adrian. And she thought of that look in his eyes, the look of a man who wanted something. Silverwood Manor had withstood storms, wars, and generations of change. But this new threat felt different. Subtle. Stealthy. A whisper. A shadow. A danger creeping not from outside the gates, but through the heart of someone her daughter trusted. Eleanor pressed her hand against the cold glass. "Whatever you're hiding," she murmured into the night. I will uncover it. Outside, the wind carried a faint rustle through the roses, as if the garden itself was whispering back. It was a crisp Saturday morning when Clara burst into the manor, her cheeks flushed from the cold wind and her eyes sparkling with an excitement Eleanor had not seen since her daughter was a child. She rushed through the foyer so quickly that she nearly collided with Margaret, who was carrying a stack of freshly folded linens. Oh, sorry, Margaret. Clara laughed breathlessly. No harm done, Miss Clara, Margaret replied, stepping aside with a knowing smile that Eleanor saw from the landing above. Eleanor had been descending the staircase slowly, her cane tapping softly. You're home earlier than expected, she remarked. Clara spun toward her mother, glowing like the morning sun. Mom, I have something to tell you. Eleanor felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and worry tighten in her chest. She descended the last few steps and nodded toward the parlor. Let's sit, she said gently. Clara practically floated into the room. Eleanor followed, settling into her usual armchair near the window. The autumn light spilled across the rugs, casting golden patterns across the room. Clara stood in front of her, nervous, excited, shaking slightly. And then she held out her left hand. A diamond gleamed on her finger. Beautiful. Flawless. Far more expensive than anything Clara would have purchased herself. Eleanor's breath caught. He proposed, Clara whispered, her voice trembling with joy. Mom, I'm engaged. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the mantel clock. Eleanor forced her lips into a smile, one she prayed looked genuine enough. Congratulations, my love, she said, rising slowly to embrace her daughter. Clara sighed happily in her arms, unaware of the storm gathering behind Eleanor's eyes. But Eleanor felt it, an icy dread sinking through her ribs. The engagement wasn't just sudden. It was too sudden. Too perfectly timed. Too conveniently placed right as Eleanor's suspicions about Adrian grew sharper by the day. As she pulled back from the hug, Eleanor studied the ring again. It's lovely, she said. Isn't it? Clara held her hand up, admiring the sparkle. Adrian said he wanted something timeless. Something that reminded him of me. Eleanor said nothing, but internally she catalogued everything. The cut, the size, the clarity. A ring like that cost more than Adrian should have been able to afford. Unless he didn't buy it. Unless someone else had. Or unless it was financed in a way that Clara didn't understand. But Eleanor didn't ask, not yet. She didn't want to tarnish her daughter's happiness with her suspicion. Not until she had proof. They moved to the sitting area where Clara sank into the couch, practically bursting with excitement. Eleanor remained graceful and calm, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Tell me how it happened, Eleanor said softly. Clara laughed, a bright musical sound. He took me to the little lake behind the botanical gardens. We walked around for a while just talking, and then he asked me if I wanted to spend forever with him. Eleanor's chest tightened. He said he never felt this way before, Clara continued dreamily. That he didn't want to waste another day without knowing I'd be by his side. How romantic, Eleanor murmured. Clara didn't notice the faint tremor behind her mother's words. And of course, Clara added, he wants to come by tonight so we can celebrate together. He said he'd love to speak with you in person. Eleanor smiled thinly. She had expected as much. Of course. I'll be here. Clara reached across the space between them. Mom, I know things have been a little tense about him, but I want you to be excited. I want you to be part of this with me. Eleanor covered her daughter's hand with her own. I want that too. Clara's shoulders relaxed. She truly believed this moment was perfect. But perfection was rarely real. Later that afternoon, Eleanor walked alone through her garden, the roses turning deeper in color as the season shifted. She paused near the fountain, watching the water ripple with the slightest breeze. He felt tired, exhausted even. The weight of the ring on Clara's finger felt like a knot in her stomach. She needed answers. And soon. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw the name she had been waiting for. Samuel Rourke. Eleanor answered quickly. Samuel, please tell me you have something. I do, he said, his tone sober. I'm afraid you're not going to like it. Eleanor exhaled slowly. Tell me everything. Rourke cleared his throat. Your future son-in-law Adrian Hale has a past he never shared. Eleanor's grip tightened on the phone. He's had financial troubles for years, Rourke continued. A failed business. Significant debt. He's been evicted twice in the last 5 years. Eleanor closed her eyes. There's more, Rourke said. He changed his last name 3 years ago. Her stomach dropped. Changed it from what? Adrian Cole. Eleanor froze. Cole. Yes. That name rang bells. So I dug deeper. The silence hung heavy. Eleanor, Rourke said gently, Adrian Cole was involved in a fraud investigation 7 years ago. Nothing that led to jail time but enough to stain a record. And that's not all. He had a relationship before your daughter. A wealthy widow. He courted her quickly, proposed within months. Eleanor's pulse hammered in her ears. What happened to her? She ended it. A friend caught him snooping through her files. After that he disappeared. Re-emerged later as Adrian Hale. The truth struck like a blow to the chest. Eleanor, Rourke added softly, your instincts were right. This man isn't just suspicious. He's dangerous. He preys on vulnerable women with money. A cold chill swept through Eleanor's body. Thank you, Samuel, she whispered. You've done more than enough. When she hung up, her hand trembled. The garden seemed suddenly darker, colder. The fountain's gentle trickle sounded sinister. The roses' shadows stretched long and sharp across the ground. Adrian was not a charming stranger. He was a predator. And he had sunk his claws into Clara. That evening, as the sun set behind the manor and golden light faded into dusk, Adrian arrived. Clara rushed to greet him with the excitement of someone in love. Adrian smiled warmly, his gaze flicking briefly, too briefly, over Eleanor's silhouette in the doorway. Mrs. Hartwell, he said, approaching with confidence, I wanted to thank you for welcoming me into your home again. Eleanor's expression remained unreadable. And I wanted to speak with you directly, Adrian continued, man too well, future son-in-law. The audacity in his tone made Eleanor's breath still. Clara beamed between them, unaware of the storm about to break. Adrian reached for Clara's hand, squeezing it gently. I've proposed. And she's accepted. I hope you'll give us your blessing. Eleanor studied him, not the suit, not the smile, not the polished charm. She looked into his eyes. And she saw the truth hiding there. A lie wrapped in silk. A thief disguised as love. She inhaled once, slow and steady. Then, with the calm precision of a woman who knew her enemy now stood right before her, Eleanor said, We need to talk, Adrian. Adrian's expression flickered the moment Eleanor said those words. We need to talk. Just for half a heartbeat his confidence cracked, like a mask slipping. But he recovered swiftly. Of course, he said, smiling smoothly. Whatever you'd like. Clara, still glowing with the bliss of her engagement, didn't sense the tension. I'll go tell Margaret to bring tea, she said, kissing Adrian lightly on the cheek before slipping into the hallway. The moment she disappeared, the house fell eerily quiet. Eleanor gestured toward the smaller sitting room, the one she used for serious discussions. Adrian followed her inside. The room was intimate, lined with old paintings and warm lamps. A fireplace crackled softly, but the air still felt cold. Eleanor sat in her usual chair. Adrian chose the one opposite her, crossing his legs comfortably, hands folded like a man with nothing to hide. Adrian, Eleanor began calmly, I'd like to understand you better. He smiled. I'm an open book. Eleanor leaned back slightly. Are you? Something sharp flickered in his eyes. She continued, her tone steady and polite. You've told Clara remarkably little about your past. I'm sure you understand why that concerns me. I've just had a difficult life, Adrian replied smoothly. Not everyone is lucky enough to grow up with wealth and stability. I prefer to look forward, not dwell on painful memories. A well-crafted answer. Practiced. Too practiced. And yet, Eleanor said, your past is part of who you are. Surely Clara deserves to know. Adrian chuckled softly as if amused. Mrs. Hartwell, I assure you, I love your daughter. I would never hurt her. That's not what I asked. Adrian's smile twitched. Eleanor chose her next words carefully. Tell me about your family. His jaw tightened for the briefest moment. I told you, he said slowly, they're not in my life anymore. I see. And what about your work? Adrian's voice grew more defensive. I run an investment consultation service. A business, Eleanor said lightly. Yes. She tilted her head. And your business is thriving? Successful? Of course, Adrian said, though his tone lacked conviction. I manage things on my own terms. Eleanor folded her hands gently. And your finances? Adrian blinked. What about them? You purchased Clara a ring worth approximately $80,000. Forgive me, but I'm curious how a small independent consultant afforded something so extravagant. For a long moment, Adrian didn't speak. Then he leaned forward, voice low. Are you interrogating me, Mrs. Hartwell? I'm asking reasonable questions, Eleanor replied. Questions any mother would ask. He smiled again, but this time the smile didn't reach his eyes. You don't trust me. No, Eleanor said quietly, I don't. The air thickened. The fireplace crackled. A clock ticked softly in the hall. Adrian's charming facade began to crumble at the edges. Eleanor met his gaze with unflinching calm. I know about your financial troubles, Adrian. He froze. I know about the business that failed. The debts. The evictions. His expression tightened. I know about the name you used before Hale. His eyes darkened with something sharp, anger or fear or both. And more importantly, Eleanor continued, I know about the widow you pursued before Clara. The one you courted, proposed to, and attempted to steal from. Adrian inhaled sharply, the first sign he truly felt cornered. Who told you that? He demanded. I have my ways. His jaw clenched. His composure cracked. For the first time Adrian looked dangerous. Not charming, not smooth, not harmless. Dangerous. He leaned back slowly like a man recalculating his next move. The firelight cast shadows across his face, sharpening the angles. Well, he said at last, his tone icy, it seems you've been digging into things that aren't your concern. My daughter is always my concern, Eleanor said firmly. Adrian's lips curled slightly. Clara won't appreciate this. Eleanor held his gaze. Clara will appreciate honesty. When she learns the truth, she will understand everything. He chuckled under his breath, cold and humorless. You think she'll believe you over me? I know exactly what Clara wants to hear. And I know how to say it. Eleanor felt a chill sweep down her spine. He said it with confidence, with certainty. As if he had shaped Clara's emotions carefully, intentionally. As if he had done this before. Is that why you rushed the engagement? Eleanor asked quietly. To secure her trust before anyone could question you. Adrian's eyes flashed with irritation. I didn't rush anything. Clara knows what she wants. You pushed her, Eleanor corrected. The lake, the quick proposal, the expensive ring, classic tactics used by men who pretend love to mask their intentions. Adrian's jaw twitched. You think you're clever, he said. But you're just an old woman who doesn't understand how the world works anymore. Eleanor smiled faintly. Oh, Adrian. If you believe age makes me blind, you've made your first real mistake. Silence spread between them like smoke. Adrian broke it first. I'm not leaving, he said coldly. Clara and I are getting married. And if you try to interfere, you'll only push her toward me faster. A threat. Spoken openly without shame. Eleanor felt her breath steady, her determination sharpen. And what do you expect to gain from all this? She asked. Adrian smiled darkly. You know the answer. Her estate. Her wealth. Her daughter's inheritance. Everything Richard and she had built, preserved, protected. Adrian wanted it all. Eleanor rose slowly to her feet, standing tall despite her age, her cane, her trembling hand. You will not hurt my daughter, she said. Adrian stood as well, stepping forward until only a foot separated them. I don't want to hurt her. I want a better life. A life funded by her mother. A slow grin spread across Adrian's face. If necessary, Eleanor's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. You will not win, Adrian. I promise you that. He tilted his head. We'll see. At that moment, Clara's voice echoed down the hall. Mom? Adrian? The tea is ready. Adrian instantly switched expressions. Eyes softening, posture relaxing, smile warming like he'd flipped a switch inside him. He turned to Eleanor, whispering one final icy warning. Don't get in my way. Then he walked into the hall, greeting Clara with gentle warmth as if nothing had happened. Eleanor remained in the sitting room, hands shaking slightly. She knew now. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was war. A quiet, hidden war fought with secrets, lies and manipulation. Adrian had a past stained with deception. And now he had a future plan, one that led straight into the heart of Silverwood Manor. But Eleanor Hartwell wasn't a woman who surrendered her family easily. She would uncover the rest of Adrian's past. And she would stop him. No matter what it took.
Adrian's true face has been revealed, and this is no longer suspicion, it is a quiet, hidden war for the future of Silverwood Manor. Eleanor Hartwell has sworn she will stop him. But how do you fight a man who smiles like an angel while whispering threats like a devil? What is the first, ruthless move Eleanor will make against Adrian? We need your sharpest predictions. Let us know what move Eleanor will make in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a single moment of this hidden war.